Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. We've got a lot to talk about here with the weather across the southern and eastern United States, as well as in the tropics. Let's get straight to it here. And welcome to my channel if you're a first-time guest. I am a meteorologist in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. I've been on YouTube since the end of last year, and I appreciate you taking some time to stop by and take a look at my video here. So we've got a big storm forming here off the East Coast here over the next couple of days, and this very well could get named our next tropical system. I think it's going to be subtropical, meaning that it doesn't have the warmest core that you would see in hurricanes, but does have the wind and does have the rain bands with it that could technically give it the effects of a tropical system. And the next name on the list would be Ophelia. We are going to see this forming east of Florida here over the next 24 hours, and it may become a named system sometime later Friday or Friday night. There's a chance the Hurricane Center passes on giving it a name. Either way, the impacts are going to be pretty well felt here across the eastern seaboard, beginning on the southeast coast here by early on Friday, and then lifting north into the mid-Atlantic region Friday night, Saturday morning, and then up into the northeast as we get through the weekend. Lots of rain, lots of wind coming here. And this is probably not going to be our last system for the season. I'm expecting at least another one coming off of Africa here as we get later into this weekend, maybe early next week. Now, right now, we do have Category 2 Nigel, Hurricane Nigel, passing well east of Bermuda, turning away to the northeast. That will begin to weaken as it moves into some cooler waters with drier air in place. Here's our area of concern. Right now, not yet an invest, so we don't have models being run on it specifically for a tropical system, but I do think certainly we'll start to see those happening here in the next, I don't know, maybe later today into tonight. We may see tropical models being run on that. And of course, I'll give you guys updates on my community channel for that. And we do have a wave that has just left the African coast that does show some gradual development chances here. It's going to take a while to get something like this to form due to some hostile environment. But by the time we get maybe later into the weekend and early next week, we could have a tropical storm out in here. With the next name on the list being Philippe. If for some reason this does not get named Ophelia, then this one would be Ophelia. But either way, trying to predict that is a challenge. And if you're like me, all you can say is Ophelia. So, oh my Lord, I've had some coffee this morning. So please forgive me for my stupid jokes. But anyway, I'm going to annotate here and show you guys kind of what's going on the map here. This is a wide view of the water vapor of the tropics, and you can see pretty large outflow coming here from Hurricane Nigel, and it's got still a pretty big eye with it, but has not strengthened to major hurricane strength. It's been a Category 2 at this point, and I think it's pretty much done strengthening as it starts turning north and east and into cooler waters here. Now, off the southeast coast, and I'm going to zoom in on this in a little bit, we do have thunderstorm activity, which has persisted. We don't have a low-level center at this point, but models do show something forming somewhere in here over the next 24 hours and generally tracking kind of in this direction towards the Carolinas here by the end of Friday evening into early Saturday morning. There's another system here over the plains that is going to produce some rough weather with it. I've seen reports of some pretty big hail and some strong winds over parts of northwest Texas, Oklahoma, and southern Kansas over the last 24 hours. More of that severe weather is expected, albeit at a lesser level of intensity and lesser area in general today into tonight. But more storms are expected later in the week, so I'm going to spend some time later in this video talking about that severe weather potential. The Pacific is pretty quiet. You don't see it on the map here. There is Tropical Storm Kenneth, which briefly is pulsed up to that strength. Not a threat to land. I'm not going to talk about it. And if you ask what the frequency Kenneth is, I'll just tell you it's about 40 miles per hour and not going to be happening for much longer as it hits some cooler water. So our next system to keep an eye on at this point, which I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go in the longer term because it hasn't formed yet, but some models pick up on that developing as it moves kind of in this general direction here. It's going to take probably about 5 to 6 days for that to happen. And then beyond that, there's some split in the models. The majority take it in this direction, but a few try to sneak it into the Caribbean. So we're going to have to take a look at that here in the coming days. The thing I will show you is that we don't have a great chance for this to develop yet in the next couple of days. The reason why is there's an upper level low here and an upper level low here, and both of these are providing some wind shear from the south and west, meaning there'll be hostile conditions so that this system is not likely to develop. And the longer it does take to develop, and that certainly could be at least another 5 or 6 days when it gets out into here, the less likely it feels the pull northward that Hurricane Nigel did, and the more likely it tries to track more on the southern route. So right now, I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but it is something I'm watching. We've seen models kind of go flip and flop between going into the Caribbean and turning this way, or trying to sneak farther west, or not really developing, or developing and going out this direction. So a lot of uncertainty on our plates at this point, and it's really too early to try to speculate exactly what might evolve from this, but it is something I do think we need to keep an eye on in the longer range. Here is the northwestern Atlantic, and you can see Hurricane Nigel. Again, a very big eye, but some dry air has wrapped into that, and that's kept it from strengthening to a major hurricane, and it's pulling away. Bermuda's over here, and you can see not really a threat to land at this point, just a fish storm is what we colloquially will call it. But yes, you can see kind of that drier air wrapping in, and occasionally it gets fought off over here, but it's pretty much past its peak at this point and should continue to move into cooler water. Bermuda's right here. You're in pretty good shape in Bermuda. Our next low pressure system is going to form in this general direction, probably somewhere in here north of the Bahamas and east of the Space Coast of Florida, and that is expected to go in this direction and then maybe bend back into North Carolina, possibly even into South Carolina, and a slight chance it tries to come back all the way into the Outer Banks. It gets to a certain point where eventually it's going to get kicked away to the northeast or to the east-northeast. But all the moisture is going to build up on the west side of this, meaning we could have a lot of rain and wind across this region here Friday into the first part of the weekend. So we're going to talk a lot about that here in the later parts of this video. Here's a quick look at Nigel. And a big storm, but not one that is going to be organizing any further. You can see some higher clouds moving in from the west here. That's providing a bit more wind shear. And so we are past our peak here. Wind speeds are 100 miles per hour. So it's a pretty decent category 2, but as we get into cooler waters here tonight, tomorrow, we should be back down to category 1. And by the time we get to about Friday afternoon and evening, the system will be below hurricane strength. It'll be over cooler waters, and it will become post-tropical. So just a large cyclone here over the northeastern Atlantic. Looking off of the African coastline, you can see our wave has now moved off. Here's the Cabo Verdes, and you can see it's moving westward at about 15 miles per hour. Out ahead of it, we've got some wind shear. We've got additional thunderstorms that are in the monsoon trough here. And for the time being, this is not going to be exploding with development. It'll gradually take its time before it becomes anything a great concern, and that may happen over the weekend. I'll show you some spaghetti here, at least ensemble plots from the European, so you can see how uncertain things look here as this system moves westward. This is over the weekend, and we don't see too much spread at this point. Only one member turns it to the right as a hurricane or a stronger tropical storm. Everything else keeps it kind of weak, but does slowly develop it. Then as we get into early next week, we start to see a split. There's some ensemble solutions that are stronger and following in the wake of Nigel. There are others that keep it weaker into the west, which obviously is of concern. And then as we get even farther out into the end of next week, we see a bigger spread here with stronger solutions all the way into the eastern Atlantic and no threat to land. A few solutions that are kind of a moderate intensity here, maybe coming up close to where Lee and Nigel came as a hurricane. And then a couple of ensembles show the potential for the system to stay a little bit weaker and track near the northeastern Caribbean or just north of the islands, which those would be ones, if I'm in the United States, I need to be a little bit more mindful of at this point. But again, this is late next week and a lot can certainly change. Until we have a better handle on things, there's no need to go stress people out about things that just haven't happened yet. Could it become an issue? Certainly. I mean, it is still September. We certainly still see storms that can track here, but the way things have gone this season, I would be really shocked if something tried to get into the northwestern Caribbean, the Gulf, or even Florida. I would be shocked at this point due to the fact that this system will probably try to develop in here by the time we get later into the weekend. However, there's one model run that does not agree with me, and I don't think it's right. I'm going to show it because you guys will probably run into it on social media, but please don't take a lot of stock into it. This is the 0Z GFS, and you can see developing our system here over the weekend into a depression and then a tropical storm early next week. And this system, rather than turning up into the weakness that's left behind by this ridge, somehow keeps it on a westerly track, which would be potentially problematic. It's got a quickly strengthening storm going right through the southern Leeward Islands here next Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and then continuing the track south of Hispaniola as a strong hurricane late next week, right across Jamaica and then towards the Cayman Islands, where it deepens it quickly into a powerful storm. This would be a Category 5, but this is the 2nd of October, and this is one model run, and I'll show you in a minute that the other model runs do not even show that. So right now, you may see scary model images showing this thing going into the eastern Gulf and hitting the central coast in 2 weeks. But I will say to make a call like that right now, I think is very foolish, and it's not one that I'm making. If you look back at the model run before, you will see nothing even remotely close to the solution. It's got the storm all the way out in here. So while it may try to threaten the Caribbean islands here, by the time we get to about next Wednesday, it does have the storm making a right turn across Puerto Rico. By the way, this would be a hurricane hitting Puerto Rico, so that's something we do need to keep an eye on. And then turning south and east of Bermuda and away. So the forecast for next Wednesday, or not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after the 4th, according to the GFS, on one model run is the North Central Atlantic, on the other is the Southeastern Gulf. Only a spread of 2,000 miles, folks. Nothing to see here. Behind it, by the way, it does show one more system trying to develop here in the Central Atlantic, but that would not be a threat to land. So again, I just want to show that to you to just make a teaching point that we really can't jump on anything in the longer term. I think a lot of you that are regular viewers already know that, but there's a few that probably have heard things on TikTok and Instagram and on Twitter that this would be a Gulf hurricane. And I'm not ruling it out completely, but right now I think the odds for that are extremely slim, and it's certainly not something I would go out with an official forecast at this point. The European control has our low pressure system here off the Carolina coast on Saturday, has our next system here, Philippe, it looks like towards the end of the weekend starting to develop, but it keeps it a lot weaker than the GFS. And you will see overall the control takes it to the north and east of the islands. The GFS has it 300 miles south. So we definitely have a spread already here in about a week. And even the European says this isn't really going to get going here until maybe the following weekend east of Bermuda, and then pulls away to the right. So that's what we like to see at this point. Just another recurving fish storm. Nothing to see here. Keep it that way. But you'll see things still stay active on the East Coast behind our wave coming up here, which will probably be a subtropical storm. We've got another area of low pressure trying to form east of Florida here and coming up the southeast coast. So if you see all these fall systems coming up the southeast coast in the mid-Atlantic region, and you know how things work out in the winter, this can certainly be a more hopeful look for those of us to see potentially East Coast storms here as we get into the wintertime, but that's an awful ways off at this point. But sometimes what we see in the fall dictates what the winter looks like. Because we were La Nina last year, going to an El Nino this year, this could be certainly a better winter for those of you who want to see some snow here in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, because I know last year was pretty much pathetic if you talk about a real winter. So here's a look at the European low pressure forming and moving up into the eastern Carolinas, and then you see our next system forming down in here probably early next week, and it stays pretty weak. And then turns northward following the control here, and we have a low-end tropical storm that is probably going to pass east of Bermuda by next weekend. The Canadian model is a little bit more aggressive, but shows a quickly strengthening low off the southeast coast. This would be a subtropical storm hitting near Wilmington or Calabash sometime Saturday during the morning hours, and then that moves off into New England. Then we see our next system tracking towards the northern Leeward Islands. And this is something, we definitely have to keep an eye on here for next Wednesday. Could be even Tuesday night, but probably Wednesday. But it does keep it pretty weak and has it tracking across Hispaniola and Cuba. All these mountainous islands are going to cause the system to struggle to form and maintain its strength if it goes over that track. This is kind of middle of the road between the aggressive GFS and the weaker and faster and more of a recurving European model. And then finally, I'll show you the Icon model. This is the German model, and you can see it's got our low pressure system coming up through the Outer Banks here on Saturday. So we do have anywhere from Myrtle Beach to the Outer Banks, still some spread on what'll happen here Saturday morning. And then it does not develop our wave here into Philippe until we get to about next Monday and Tuesday. It does have another system behind it, which would be our R storm potentially, but that one already starting to curve northward. So yeah, the Icon, the Canadian, the GFS all show this as potentially a threat next Wednesday to the Leeward Islands, eventually Puerto Rico. The European model, which is the one that's been really consistent, although not always our most accurate model, shows that this system is going to struggle the entire way and go north of the island. So it's going to be an interesting battle to see next week. I don't think we're going to have a great idea yet on the future of the system until maybe we get to next Monday or even Tuesday when the storm starts to form. So until then, we're just really just speculating at this point, and you can only do so much of that accurately. So anyway, let's take a look at our coastal low that is getting ready to form here. Not a circulation yet with this, but certainly a lot of rain and thunderstorms over the Gulf Stream here. You can see bright colored colors. bright colors. And you can see lots of lightning strikes here north of Abaco here in Grand Bahama Islands, and certainly a lot of thunderstorm activity over Andros Island as well. Everything pulling away from Florida today. Yesterday, everything was moving in from the coast, and we got hammered on the Treasure Coast. Today, you can see things are starting to pull away, and as everything pulls away, we usually see a tightening up over the Gulf Stream, and this is what I think is going to help things to get going here in the next 24 hours, probably around this time tomorrow morning. So when you've got kind of this offshore flow in here, you typically get tightening of pressures in this general area. Let me give you guys a better looking color here so you can actually see. But when you start to see things kind of tugging away from the coast over the warmer waters and away from the cooler land, not that Florida's cool, but it is cooler than the ocean water, then we typically see tightening up of pressures. And what will eventually happen is that we will see a low-level circulation form. It's not going to be tropical, as we do have some colder, drier air here in the mid-Atlantic region that is funneling in. But it could become subtropical. It may have enough of a warm core, enough thunderstorm action to see low pressure forming and developing and strengthening, perhaps significantly below 1,000 millibars by the time it gets up into here and stays over the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is this area in here, and this area is going to remain over it for a couple of days before trying to turn back somewhere in this direction. So yeah, definitely something to watch here, and definitely could get a name out of it. And unlike the system that formed on Memorial Day weekend, which caused a lot of problems down in here, this one's going to spend more time over the Gulf Stream, and the waters are warmer than they were in May. So I very much think it does have a chance at getting a name. Here's a look at the GFS model from earlier, and I will show you kind of how things evolve here. It's got low pressure down below 1,000 millibars here by Friday afternoon, and then deepening Friday night into the mid 990s and making landfall somewhere here near Cape Lookout, and then coming up into the inner banks here on Saturday morning. So the GFS says a lot of rain developing on the north side of this system, moving in well ahead of our low pressure system. So Thursday night and Friday over the Carolinas, then Friday night over the mid-Atlantic, and Saturday morning over the southern parts of New England. This is the coastal boundary, and then the actual circulation's a little bit farther behind, and that comes up the Chesapeake Bay here on Saturday afternoon, and then we'll turn away to the right. So kind of two waves of heavy rain coming for the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. The first one at the very end of the week and start of the weekend, the second one during the middle part of the weekend, and then things should improve by the time we get into early next week as it cools down a little bit. Potential rainfall is pretty high across this area. I talked about this in my last few videos, but you can see with those two waves of rain, we have potential to see over 3 inches of rain on and east of the I-95 corridor, basically from near Richmond straight up to Boston and southern New Hampshire, and significant amounts potentially on the coastline here, maybe over 4 inches in places like Queens and the Bronx here, and certainly a significant rain as well on the Jersey Shore and across the Chesapeake Bay. The GFS showing potentially over 4 inches of rain coming out of this. So it's going to be a nasty weekend. This is a look here at the NAM model. This is more of a mesoscale model than a global model. It tends to break down these features a little bit with more detail, but it doesn't always get the global picture correct. And this is Friday morning. You can see the pressure is very quickly strengthening and dropping into the mid 990s. Look at some of these winds on the western side, 50 knots, which is about 58 miles per hour. So very rough seas expected as this low quickly winds up. And the NAM continues to track it more to the northwest, almost towards Pender County and New Hanover counties here, with the strongest winds being offshore, but you've got some onshore flow coming here from areas basically north of Southport, straight up through Carolina Beach, Wrightsville Beach, right up to Hampstead, even all the way up to Jacksonville and New Bern. So could be a nasty Friday night for you, maybe even a few power outages possible if this is correct. And well to the north of this low, we do have the gradient tight, so we get those stronger winds as well over the eastern Delmarva and even up to the Jersey Shore early in the day on Saturday. So, excuse me. Got this frog in my throat. I don't know what to do about it. But anyway, here you can see the wind gusts on the NAM, and they're starting to pick up here on Friday morning, 30 miles per hour gusts in the morning, picking up over 40 miles per hour on the North Carolina coast, even down to Horry County in South Carolina, and perhaps as much as 60 to 70 mile per hour winds just off the shore here. Even 60 mile per hour winds showing up here in Brunswick County and Horry County later on Friday evening. And then that's going to lift away and weaken as we get on into Saturday. Here's a look at the Canadian model. It shows a lot of what the NAM is showing as well. It's a little farther west, and a little quicker with those winds, and then brings a second wave here on Saturday. And then as we head up into the northeast, we see winds starting to pick up here Friday afternoon across New Jersey and New York, and then across southern New England on Saturday with wind gusts over 35 to 40 miles per hour possible. But really, it is windy, but the wind is going to be the big challenge out of this storm on the coast, or the rain is going to be the big challenge. Here's a look at the MJO. This shows you the phase diagram, and this shows that we are moving out of a favorable phase for a lot of enhanced tropical activity in the Atlantic and shifting it over into the Pacific here. We're at a phase 2 and 3 right now, heading into a phase 4, and we should start to see more action in the Western Pacific here as we get to the end of the month of September and through the first half of the month of October. And this will mean, I think, things are going to be overall a lot quieter in the tropics, especially in the eastern and central Atlantic. Doesn't mean we can't have something forming on a boundary here near the coast of the U.S. or in the Caribbean, but it means a lot less favorable action for seeing these long track systems like a Lee, for example, like a Franklin. So things do start to turn a little bit quieter, I think, overall, but it certainly means October, we still have to watch for things forming potentially closer to the coast. So that's what we're watching. The Storm Prediction Center has a marginal risk for severe weather today in eastern Oklahoma into the Arklatex. Tomorrow, a bigger area of marginal severe weather. I think we're going to see a slight risk somewhere in here over the Red River Valley and into the Texas Panhandle. And then our slight risk as we get into Friday and Friday night across the central and northern plains. And then even more action expected here on Saturday, spreading eastward into the Missouri River Valley and down to as far south as Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We do have a potential for severe weather on Saturday. So college football games across this area, Big 12, Big 10 games could be impacted by the threat for potentially some severe storms. Here's a closer look at our marginal risk for today. Mainly a hail and wind threat here, mainly in places like Paris, Texas, Fort Smith, Arkansas, Tulsa, and Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And then as we head into the day tomorrow, a bigger area of marginal risk all the way back into eastern New Mexico, all the way to the Arklatex and up to Kansas and Nebraska. And then as we head into the weekend, we see that threat for severe weather shifting north of this area here. I'll go up to FEMA Region 5, I think it is. Man, what is going on with this? All right, well, let's just look at Nebraska here. We do see a bigger threat for severe weather Friday across Nebraska and northern Kansas and central South Dakota. There could be big hail and strong winds out of this before things shift eastward on Saturday into Iowa, into Missouri, into eastern Kansas. The reason why? Well, we've got multiple disturbances and a bigger trough moving into the western U.S., sending moisture from the Gulf and from the Pacific up into the edge of this ridge, and we see faster flow aloft, which leads to stronger wind flow for our storms, and very intense upper level feature here by Saturday afternoon into the evening over the Dakotas, with the warm sector in here likely to see that strongest amount of wind. You can see our supercell index starts climbing here. Not so high today or even really tomorrow, but tomorrow evening as we get into central Kansas, it starts picking up. And then Saturday and Sunday, we do have a lot of wind potential and a few supercells are possible across this area. Here's what our predicted radar looks like for the rest of today. And we see just a few scattered showers and storms, but things picking up again across Oklahoma this afternoon and evening. And then more storms forming as we get into the day tomorrow. Let me at least get us to the right day here. I swear I did not sleep well last night. You guys can tell I'm struggling, but it's okay. God's going to get me through this. But here we go. Storms picking up here this afternoon across eastern Oklahoma. We could see a few stronger storms late in the afternoon around 6, 7 o'clock, both in Nebraska and across western Kansas and southeast Colorado. And then more action as we get into the day tomorrow. You can see we're going to continue that threat for some stronger storms in the morning, even farther east, and then more storms expected in the afternoon across this region here. And here's a look at the HRRR model zoomed in on Oklahoma today, and we can see storms are going to move away to the east this morning into Arkansas. Severe weather threat's going to be pretty limited at that point, and then we're going to see more development here tonight and more storms expected as we get into tomorrow especially. We could see some pretty big hail here in North Texas, places like Sherman and Gainesville and Denton here by the time we get to about 4 or 5 o'clock tomorrow. Some pretty nasty looking cells here on the Red River. And then into the evening hours as well across northeast Texas. And then wave number 2 comes across here in the high plains by tomorrow night. So thank you for watching. And if you're still with me, I apologize for struggling there. I don't know what's going on, but I appreciate y'all very much. If you could subscribe to my channel, I really would appreciate that. I have a membership option as well. If you want to support me, it's $10 a month, really not a big deal. Those are the folks that I'm going to be responding to a lot quicker and interacting with and giving you guys some more detailed forecasts. I'm traveling here later today and I'll be away through Friday night, so I probably will not get to a video until Saturday morning. I'll try to get some updates, but not going to be in a spot where I can really cut a video, and I apologize for that in advance. I hope you all have a great rest of the week. I appreciate your time today. And as always, I give all the glory to God who allows me to do this. He got me through this video. I was struggling mightily. The devil tried to get in there, but God gave me the strength to continue. And as a Christian man, I just thank God every day. I was not a Christian until I was 30. And in the last 10 years, I have started to grow more and more in my faith. And I realize if you're still watching, you may not be a person of faith. And you know what? That's okay. In the end, it may matter more, but it doesn't matter to me personally. I can just share my story and my testimony with you. But I do want to read to you from the King James Bible, Ephesians 2:8-10, and that's, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them." The only difference between me and maybe a non-believer on here is that I've just accepted that gift. That's it. Anybody can give anyone a gift and you can choose to accept it or not. But to me, the ultimate price paid for us by God is the fact that not the good works that we're doing, but the good works he's already done for us by giving his son, Jesus Christ, as a sacrificial lamb so that we can be saved eternally. That's the only difference between me and somebody who's not a believer. It's that I've accepted the gift that God has given us. He gives it to everybody, but only so many people can actually accept it and then live out the ways of the Christian faith. However, just remember this, that you only get so much time on earth, and I personally did not want to struggle with my eternal future. I believe that I was created here. I didn't know exactly where I was going to go, but thank goodness, thank God that he has given me this gift, and all I have to do is believe in the unseen and just know that there is that holy presence and that I can certainly accept that gift of Christ. And I pray that you do as well. In fact, I'm happy to pray for you with whatever situation you're going through, whether or not you're a believer. Because trust me, if you're a believer, it's not any easier than if you're a non-believer, especially if you're somebody like me who really believes you should minister to other folks and to pray for other people. If anything, that's more of a burden. However, that burden is lifted off of us if we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior. So that's the great news I wanted to share with you all today, and I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. And I'll see you again here at some point this weekend, but I hope you all have a blessed rest of the week. Take care.